One of the things that I think is disrupting our collective, I hate the term collective sense-making now, given the way it gets abused, but for lack of a better term, one of the things that's disrupting our collective sense-making is that people do not understand that they own the downsides of their own arguments. And I want to give a couple of cases of this so you can see how it plays into the particular focus of the moment, right? Which has to do with the implications of a massacre and what it says about what we should or shouldn't do with respect to gun control in the US. But I want to start with an analogy that will be clearer. If we think back to some of the earlier battles in the COVID public health sphere, there were lots of people who, for example, argued that we, because we raised questions about the safety and effectiveness of the COVID vaccines, were guilty of killing a great many people, right? And indeed, it is true that if the vaccines were safe and net effective, that, as we said at the time, that it is inevitable that there would be people who would lose their life if they avoided them on the basis that we didn't know fully what their safety and effectiveness profile was. That's unavoidable. But if you say not that lives will be lost as a result of the argument you're making, which is true, but you say you are guilty of killing people by voicing that argument because you will cause hesitancy, well, then guess what? You just bought the other side of that argument, which is if it turns out that the vaccines are net harmful, if they, for example, have a net increase in all-cause mortality for those who took them, then now, by virtue of your own logic, you have become responsible for those deaths. Now, does that mean that we're responsible if the vaccines are net positive and you're responsible if they're net negative? No, because we didn't make that argument. The argument we made was that the net savings of life comes from a discussion in which we work our way as quickly and as rigorously as possible to a correct conclusion about what the right way to think about these things and the right effect is. And had we done that, we would have resulted in a intense risk stratification. We would only have discussed the possibility of vaccinating people for whom there was the potential of these things being net positive, and we would have excluded from all of the adverse events and other phenomena many people who simply didn't need them.
At some level, what you're arguing is that words have consequences, and that what we hear, what you have been told, is things like words are cheap, ideas are cheap. Right? Well, ideas aren't cheap, at least if they are carefully formulated. And words, when they are accusations that come with them the potential for, inciting of hatred and actual harm, have consequences. And one of the consequences that you are describing is you are responsible for the corollary arguments.
Yes, you are responsible for the corollaries of your own arguments. And that's not us that's doing that to you. That's you that did that to you, and you didn't realize you were doing it, presumably, or you were so arrogant to be that sure of your argument that you didn't care because you thought it couldn't possibly be otherwise. And you were wrong. But I want to change that a little bit. It's not that words have consequence. That's true. It is that that arguments have logical consequences, right? Good. And the point is, you make an argument, and you alone, there doesn't need to be another person on planet Earth. You yourself are signing up for things that logically follow from the things you say. And how bad that is for you depends on what you do when you discover it wasn't wrong, but that it wasn't right, right? If you make a bad argument, right, at the point you discover it was a bad argument or that it wasn't quite correct, what you do is you go back and you say, you know what, I misunderstood that. And the point is, that doesn't completely negate the consequences, but it means that you're not continuing to be responsible for new harm that flows from the argument that you deployed. So you have an awful lot of control over how much responsibility actually belongs to you. But that's the concept. The point is, you make an argument, and then in argument space, all sorts of things belong to you that you just bought, right? That was you. It wasn't us. And in any case, I think we've been very, very careful to phrase arguments not in terms of personally, accusing other people of doing harm. But this principle is important, and we have to be able to reach for it. You are responsible for the corollaries to your own arguments, right? And you should make arguments knowing that that is the case.